bought a piece of 3/8 plate, and that plate was 29 inches by 10 feet. Now, at 29 by 10, this table is 78 inches by 38 inches. So what I had to do was use one piece of plate, cut it, and then stitch it together. And there's one stitched piece here, and then there's the leftover piece put on here to finish out that corner. I felt good about a 3/8 plate weighs about 15 pounds per square foot, and you can multiply 29 inches by 120 inches and figure out it's heavy, like 400 pounds heavy. And it was a lot of work to move around, a lot of work to get in here. I did it all manually, by the way, like me and my muscles. I did cut the first big cut outside on the trailer, but I basically stood this piece of plate on end and walked it in. Not the safest way to do it. I do not recommend that. So anyhow, then I took a clean area of concrete, laid the plate down, and used the concrete as the flat surface, and then I welded the frame to that. So again, the frame's not super square or whatever, so there are lots of places. See that airspace under there? There are lots of places where the welds are kind of floating, or the table's kind of floating. There's a more extreme example there, where the table's sort of floating on the welds. I'm going to come back in after I'm done and add some more welds, but for right now, it's holding good, and the top is fairly flat. It didn't move a whole bunch in the heating and cooling of welding. So the base is what's now the base, which is the top of the table once I flip it over. It is nice and flat. And then, if the frame's not super square, you can't exactly use the frame to square these legs to. So what I did after getting the frame and the tabletop mated together was I took a level and I shimmed the base. There's a little piece of grinding wheel there, to where this surface of this table was as level as it can be. It's regular old hot roll plate, so it's not going to be super level, just factory. So leveled here, leveled here, leveled here, and leveled here, and did some tweaking, and I got it pretty level. It's pretty good. So then once the base was level, then I leveled the legs to that. So basically, even though the legs may not be perfectly square to the frame, is kind of irrelevant because the frame is not perfectly square to itself. The legs are perfectly, or pretty dang perfectly square to the tabletop, and that's what it needed to be. These are 11 gauge 2-inch square tubing, and they are plenty rigid enough just with the welds there to hold the table. But if ever I do any big time pulling or pushing on the table, I'm afraid I'll get into a situation where, if I got something big on top of this deal, I could get into a bind. And also, I need to practice welding and practice fabricating. So I took some scrap angle iron that I had, and I'm putting some braces on. And I've got to put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 braces. And then I've got to cut this piece out and flip this thing over. So we will get to rocking and rolling on that. All right, so I've welded on these casters. I think I overthought these. This is you turn this screw here, and then that raises and lowers the caster where my buddy's hand is. Then it pulls the wheel out of service whenever you raise the caster, so that way you can balance your table. I think I'd have been better to just put regular iron casters like what's on the Harbor Freight crane. And what I wished I'd have done was just put a backing plate here and then put those casters on. And then if I needed to adjust the height of the casters for unevenness, I could have just put washers on the in between the backing plate and the casters. Oh well, I'll ride these out till they break, which I don't think will take long. The reason for that is there's play. There's play here in the caster foot, and then there's play in between the swivel and the base. I think that between sledgehammers and whatnot, all that beating around is going to be enough to cause a problem. These are supposed to be machine casters, good for 1,200 pounds, 2,400 pounds for the set, but guess we'll see. I got my buddy out here helping me. What you got there, man?
I get the shrink ray.
You got a shrink ray? All right, you gonna help Dad move this thing?
Yes.
All right, so here's what we've got set up to turn this over. Again, that plate down there is 3/8 plate, so at 15 and change per square foot, it's pretty heavy. So to flip, oh dude, your shrink ray broke. So to flip it over, I've got the crane counterweighted, and I've got the shunt crane hooked, and we're gonna flip it up on the end and then it's hooked to this side and then flip it all the way over. I hope. We'll see. All right, bud, get your shrink ray out of the way and stand clear. Cool. just to show you, this strap here is an American-made strap. Look at the density in that webbing. And look at that webbing. I don't know, guys. Those wheels might be okay after all. I just welded them in a few spots along the outside and just tacked them in case they sucked right away. And they aren't sucking right away. Filling these joints and grind them smooth. What, Bubba?
A delivery just came over here.
A delivery just came?
Yeah.
Is it for me?
I don't know, but come on.
All right, let's go see. All right, guys, looks like I've got a delivery. Like I say, I'm gonna fill this in, grind it, clean it up, clean up the top, weld those legs, and I'll come back to you when it's a finished table. All right, guys, this day has turned into this evening, but this table is done. It's all welded together on the top. I didn't blend the weld or cap it and then blend it. I didn't see a need to. It's a workshop table. It was scrap metal a week ago, and today it's a table, so kind of hard. It's not like I'm gonna blend that weld and sand it smooth and then I'll be able to like indicate parts on it or whatever. It's not a surface plate, it's a workshop table. So you know, you got one kind of angle iron here, a piece of square tubing there. It's kind of rough looking. It looks like crap, but I built it. But it's sturdy. It's gonna last. I'm super happy. So now when I do projects or tool reviews that I video, it'll be on this thing. So before you decide to build out of scrap metal, always count the cost. And remember that 30 cent a pound price, that is negotiable. With most scrap yards anyways. This piece, I want to say I got the whole piece for 150 bucks. So the whole table together, hardware on the bottom and everything, was $260 built. But one thing you have to consider when you work with scrap is your consumables. In other words, are you going to use 3 gallons of muriatic acid taking rust off? Are you going to use 5, flap discs? I mean, if you've got $100 in consumables, to say you didn't buy a sheet of steel that was going to cost you $80 more, have you really saved any money? On this project here, because it's 3/8, I really did save a bunch of money. But that's always something you have to consider when you're working with scraps: is it cheaper or is it just more work? So anyhow, thanks for watching, guys. Subscribe if you enjoyed yourself.